Hi, my name is Christina Baker, and as strange as it may sound, I shouldn't be alive today. I want to share a bit of my story and how my life began. I came from a broken family. My parents divorced when I was 7 years old. My father was an atheist, and my mother was a non-practicing Catholic, so there was no God in our house. By the time I was 14, I was already going to bars, using illegal substances, and hanging out with the wrong crowd. I started hurting myself because I felt dead inside and wanted signs that I was still alive. When I turned 15, I started going to parties, using illegal substances, and drinking all night at bars. One night, when I was coming back home, my stepdad was standing at the top of the stairs and told me first that I was worthless. Before almost pushing me down the stairs, my mom spoke up, saying that he had given her an ultimatum. She had to choose between him or me. My mom made the decision that night that I would have to leave. So they put me on a one-way flight from Santa Cruz, Bolivia, where we lived, to Maui, Hawaii. I hadn't seen my father in 10 years. So with a backpack containing my whole life and an electric guitar on my back, I arrived in Maui, not even knowing if I would recognize my father. After about 6 hours of waiting at the airport, my father showed up. I had black makeup around my eyes, spikes, and wore all black from head to toe. And my dad gave me the news that after many years working in the oil field, he had lost everything and fallen into a strong addiction to illegal substances. And following in his footsteps, I realized this would be my reality too. He told me he ended up living on the streets, in a tent on the beach. I asked myself, does this mean I'm going to be homeless too? My dad spent some time living on the beach in Maui for several months, until some relatives found out I was living on the streets and took me to Houston, Texas. I went from house to house, but no one wanted to deal with a gothic, addicted teenager, so they sent me to Pennsylvania, where I stayed at a Red Roof Inn. My brother was in college in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and his coach, who attended a local church, found out that there was an atheist, addicted teenager living in a motel. A couple stood up at the team meeting and said, "We'll take her in." A week before September 11th, 2001, I arrived at their home and they said, "Welcome to our home. We have 2 rules here. The first is that your curfew is 11 p.m., and the second is that you need to go to church with us every Sunday." At that moment, I looked around and thought, "You don't understand. I'm an atheist." They responded, "That's okay, Chris. Welcome to our home. We'd love for you to stay, but you need to go to church." So every Sunday, I did everything I could to avoid going to church. I wore fuzzy slippers, black hoodies with offensive words, and would walk downstairs. Her name was Mrs. Hatch, and she would say, "Great, Chris, let's go. We're going to church." So every week, I went to church and listened to the pastor talk about God's love. At that stage of my life, I didn't know if something out there or even God existed. And to be honest, I felt a lot of anger in my heart, believing that if there was a God, He had put me in that situation and done this to me. When I left their house, graduated high school, and went back to the life of illegal substances, I ended up dating a drug dealer, and everything in my life continued to spiral downhill from that point on. The moment that changed everything for me, even though I didn't know if God was real, happened when I was on my way to terminate a pregnancy. I had already scheduled the procedure after finding out I was a few months pregnant. I was leaving my apartment when someone knocked hard on the door. It was my drug dealer's girlfriend. She said she needed to talk to me. She was huge, pregnant, with 2 kids by her side. We went to the bathroom in my apartment, and she pulled out a bag with a file inside. She had just printed out some papers, and I could see that they were titled "State of Texas versus this doctor." The more I read, the more I realized that a 15-year-old girl had died during one of these procedures. And then I recognized the doctor's name. It was actually the doctor I was going to see for the procedure. At that moment, this young woman grabbed my shirt and said, "Christina, I know you don't believe in God, but my God will provide for this baby. I'm asking you not to kill this child." At that point in my life, I didn't even know that the child inside me was a child. I always thought that a baby inside you was just a bunch of cells, an embryo. So who would an embryo be to dictate my life? But at that moment, looking back now, I can see that it was God's intervention in my life. See, God doesn't need you to have everything figured out, or even know Him for Him to be working in your life. That was when God's grace found me in my darkest place. I collapsed to the floor, and she told me that God would provide for the baby inside me. She pleaded with me not to kill that baby. I ended up keeping the child and named him Evan. His name means God gave grace. God showed favor. But I didn't find that out until many years later. I kept using illegal substances. I had stopped using them for a while after I had my son, but once again, I returned to that lifestyle and began living a double life. During the day, I worked as a school counselor, trying to support my son, and at night, I used substances. One time, I was driving down a road in Houston, Texas, after visiting my drug dealer's house when I was pulled over by the police. I was smoking in the car, rolled down the window, and the smoke started pouring out as the officer asked for my insurance and driver's license. He pulled me out of the car and said, "Ma'am, you're under arrest." I asked, "Why?" And aggressively, I was placed in the back of the squad car. It was in that moment that I believe I said my first prayer. I looked up with my hands cuffed behind my back and said, "If you're real, why are you doing this to me? I hate you." Then, at that moment, I went to jail, posted bail, and went back to my job. I was sitting in front of the computer where I started contemplating how to end my own life. The enemy will do that to you. He'll take you to a place where he starts convincing you that you don't matter and that it's better to be dead than alive. And that's exactly the path I was on when someone tapped me on the shoulder. It was a man from my work who told me he had a word from the Lord for me. At that moment, it could have been anyone. Buddha, Muhammad, I didn't know anything about God. I just wanted someone to help me. He invited me to a prayer meeting, and I went to this prayer meeting, where people were walking back and forth, praying in tongues I'd never heard before. They all started laying hands on me, and this man, whose name was Hilroy, said, "This is a matter of life and death." At that moment, I didn't know it was a vision, but I had an open vision in my spirit of myself dying in a car accident. And he asked me, "Would you like to receive Jesus into your life?" I answered, "Whoever you are, Jesus, come into my life and change my life." At that moment, I felt warm oil that flowed down from my head to the tips of my toes. I started shaking, and it was as if the stones I had been carrying with me for over 20 years were suddenly taken away. I truly went through a new birth, as if I was coming out of the birth canal for the first time. I saw more light, the colors were more vibrant, the lights were brighter. I had given my life to Jesus, and I wish I could tell you that I walked out of there and everything was perfect after that. But the reality was, I was facing a legal case that would change the rest of my life and my son's life. I had been walking with the Lord for 3 months, was completely free from illegal substances, and walking as a new woman, but I was still facing the possibility of going back to jail. So that day, I went to court, and while I was sitting there waiting to be judged, I heard the voice of the Lord speak to me. I told my lawyer that I needed to talk to the prosecutor. That voice was the voice of the Lord, something I had never heard before. I asked my lawyer if this would be possible. He said, "It's not the best idea to do that, but I gave you the legal advice." So we left the courtroom, and the prosecutor looked at me and asked, "So, what happened?" I said, "I just want to tell you the truth about what happened that night." He said, "Speak." "Look, I'm not the person who was in that car on September 2nd. That's the day I was arrested, but God changed my life. I gave my life to Jesus. I am a new woman, a new person." He replied, "Look, we all make mistakes sometimes. Have a great day." My whole world collided that day, but I knew I had done everything I could. We entered the courtroom, and what felt like 15 hours probably lasted 15 minutes. My lawyer approached me and raised a yellow piece of paper that changed the rest of my life. And it said, "Order of dismissal." That piece of paper represented so many things to me at that moment. What I did was walk out of the courtroom, and I started shouting and glorifying God for what He had done. And it was at that moment that I realized I had already heard the message of the cross, but now it was the first time I really understood the message of the cross and the blood He shed for my life. He paid a price for us on the cross, and even though I had done something wrong and should have paid the price, look, I committed the crime. I should have served the time. At that moment, God exonerated everything I had done and allowed me to walk as a free woman. And it was at that moment that I heard the Lord's voice again, and he said to me, "Do you see that woman up there? Do you see that judge? I am above the judicial system of the United States, and I've been here your whole life. I've been watching you your entire life, Christina." It was my moment of encountering God, the moment of go and sin no more. That's when I realized I was free to live the life he paid for me to have. God gave me the opportunity to raise my son. God gave me the opportunity to walk free, a new woman, free from illegal substances, free from alcohol, free from addiction, free from everything that enslaved me. And I believe today that God wants to do that in your life. The Lord wants to give you a clean slate. He wants to renew the vision he placed in your heart many years ago, for you, your children, and your loved ones. If God can take that addicted goth teenage girl who was lost and transform her, he can do the same for you and the people you love. So I want to encourage you with this today. There's so much more to this story. But God has written a story in your life that he intends to fulfill. There is a destiny, and the power of his strength and the power of his blood have already set you free. So God bless you. Have you ever felt lost, like there's no way out of the pain and emptiness you feel inside? Christina went through a path of darkness, but deep down, God was already with her, working in the darkest moment of her life. And if he can transform her life, can't he do the same for you? Where are you now? Do you see yourself as someone without hope? Or can you sense that, just like her, God's grace is closer than you think, waiting to transform you? Are you willing to surrender your life to the Lord, just like Christina did? Are you ready to live a renewed life, free from the chains that bind you? Ask yourself, what do you need to leave behind in order to embrace the freedom that God has for you? What will be different in your life from now on? I challenge you today to reflect on this question. Maybe it's time to change the direction of your life. But for that change to happen, you need to take a step of faith. If you want to continue on this journey of transformation, learn more about the power of God and what he has for your life, subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss the upcoming videos that will strengthen you and guide you on this journey. Let's walk together? Leave your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to know how this story impacted you. God bless you.
I was on top of a mountain somewhere, and I was surrounded by thousands and thousands of people. Everyone was in a panic. People were screaming, running, and looking over their shoulders, myself included. And that part of the vision was the most terrifying and the most real to me because, in my mind at that moment, it was as if it were actually happening. And I could see this massive mountain on fire, crossing the atmosphere, breaking apart as it sped toward the Earth's surface. And as we all ran, suddenly, a rock fell into the Pacific Ocean. It knocked us down immediately. The whole planet seemed to be shaking, vibrating so intensely that we couldn't keep our footing. And then, I heard a horrible cracking sound, as if the Earth's mantle was literally breaking apart. And again, I looked over my right shoulder and saw a gigantic tsunami, a massive wall of water, rising over that mountain. I knew we were about to perish. They named the asteroid Apophis. Back then, they even speculated that there was a significant chance that Apophis would impact the Earth in 2029, and came to the conclusion that, of all the dates, Friday, April 13th, 2029, is when Apophis will hit the Earth.
If you felt moved by this testimony and want to watch this story and more stories like this, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Here, we share powerful experiences that can transform lives and strengthen faith. Click the subscribe button, activate the notification bell to receive updates, and join our community of faith and hope.